The only good thing about Nexus Point Cenis is that it's short. 2 hallways with a boss at the end and you're already on your way to the last boss. What's the worst that can happen? This is another freedom of choice dungeon, but I highly suggest you go left first, because at least then, if your group falls apart due to the high amount of sub-basement tier trash on that side, you've only wasted a few minutes of your precious time.
Okay, let's go.
At the bottom of the stairs we've got Shadow Guard defenders, which seem like innocent cannon fodder mobs, but they actually do an ability called Null Sunder, which puts a 3% armor reduction and healing absorb on your tank. And it stacks.
Already dead.
The only way to get rid of this armor reduction is to dump healing into the tank to eat the absorb, but don't jump the gun while the tank is still gathering, because you might be eating the floor. Before we get to the next enemies in this dungeon, see these purple lines? You don't want to try to walk through them because you will take damage and get stunned. But if there's a rogue or engineer in your group, they can disable these lines by clicking on one of these rings. And then the line will vanish and you will have more space to run around wildly. And you will need to move a lot because there's a lot of dropping goop in this hallway. But moving is also harder here because the flux engineers put slow circles on random players which make you ultra slow and damage you when you move. This is another reason why slow, root and snare removals are absolutely broken this season, because they can counter a lot of scary dungeon abilities. So if you have an ability that removes slows, drop it on this circle, not naming any classes or specs by name, you know who you are.
What is going on here?
Well, I'm hiding from Sylvia.
The engineers also throw down mana batteries, which need to be killed as soon as possible, because if they finish this cast, they will explode and they will damage the whole group.
And then, boom.
There are Nexus Adepts casting Umbra Bolt, which will kill you, and then there are Corrite Arcanists that channel damage on all players. This is interruptible.
That's a lot of damage. How about a little more?
Shoot strays at a single player with Arcane Zap, and finally they apply a debuff called Transference on a random player. I talked about this debuff in a previous video weeks ago, but essentially it moves the healing on the target to the caster of the heal. And I've since tried it, and yes, it heals the healer, not the enemy that put the debuff on you. So keeping that debuff on a player can be useful if you need to heal yourself a lot. And finally, we've got the Circuit Seer. This mob is highly dangerous, so of course it's
immune to CC.
Their ability Erratic Zap puts stun circles down in the area, which looks similar to the goop circles in almost every way, except they are slightly bigger. Standing in them damages and stuns you. They also use Power Flux to channel energy into a nearby power source, which then causes a flux collapse and an arcane spill. A lot of words to say, more goop on the ground. But their most dangerous ability is Arcing Mana, which is a group-wide damage event. Because this mob cannot be stunned, displaced or CC, use defensive here if you can, because healer mechanics. This hallway is a mess, and because of all the ground effects, slows and stun lines, someone will likely body pull something extra here. It's just very chaotic. And then we get to the first boss, Chief Corrite Casrath. I have no idea what a Corrite is, but this guy sucks. Like so many fights in this season, this boss is simple to understand, sometimes harder to execute. Especially because it can get very messy. And I mean that literally. This fight is all about keeping the boss area clean and not getting trapped in goop or in a wall of lines. Like the trash before it, the boss randomly shoots players and puts purple stuff on the ground. But the added danger here is that these purple things will form lines that will heavily damage you and likely one-shot you depending on the key level. If you get reflux charge, you will know by the blue arrow above your head you can clear the lines without getting damaged, but you will get dazed. Then, at 100% energy, the boss drops a giant core spark at a random location. You obviously need to move out of this, it does damage plus goop, but it also has a knockback and puts a healing absorb on everyone. So try not to get knocked into a line of death like some random shaman I know, or don't reincarnate on top of the line when it does happen to you.
Are you not embarrassed? This is really embarrassing.
I've tried standing away from the group a bit to keep the area around the boss cleaner, but the downside is you might get trapped out of range of your group, so stack up loosely enough for people to get some clean space. Also, fun fact, if you're a demon hunter and you vengeful retreat here, you can get stuck. Click the thingy here to get back to the start of the dungeon, and it's time to tackle the right side of the hall. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this side isn't much better. You'll notice that there are these nascent dreadflails. They are harmless in their current form, but if a creeping void or grand nullifier dies, their nascent energy will form a smudge that will start sliding towards the dreadflail and try to wake it up with the amount of energy that the smudge had left. And skipping ahead a little bit here, dreadflails suck. There's already one later in the hallway, and that's more than enough. Like most mobs in this hallway,
It's immune to CC.
It also does heavy tank damage with a frontal and has a fixate/bladestorm ability that will destroy you if you don't run from it, but be careful not pulling extra trash, because the theme of this dungeon is accidental pulls in space. And then we've got another on-death mechanic here. The cursed void callers will put an increased shadow damage taken curse on the whole group when they die. The range on that is 60 yards, so you likely won't be able to outrange it. There's also a hollow soul scrounger that puts a heal absorb on a random player when it gets to 45% health. The target with a debuff needs to be healed as soon as possible because the heal absorb heals the scrounger. There's only one mob in this whole hallway that you can CC or interrupt, and you absolutely have to, and that's the Grand Nullifier. Yes, it crawls to the dread flails when it dies. Yes, it puts fear circles on the ground. But most importantly, it casts Nullify, which will literally death rate you to your grave. To top off this amazing hallway of death, we've got two more mobs, and they're both
immune to CC.
Who would have thought? Not me.
The Herald has a channeled heal absorb, healer mechanics, I know, but you can shadow meld it. It also has these lines that shoots out little void guys, and they are deadly, so try to see through the mess and sidestep the lines. The other no CC allowed mob is a Null Sentinel, and they got a magical tank buster with a 12-second dot, and they cast Dread Bellow, which is a knockback plus heavy group-wide rot damage. So, you know, healer mechanics.
Waking up in the morning, thinking about so many things. I just wish things would get better.
We've got some trash waves before this boss, and in it we've got a lingering image. You will also see these in the middle, at the start of the dungeon, and at the very end of the dungeon. These are like memory fragments of Lothraxion, the Lightforged Dreadlord friend we are chasing to stop him from dropping a nuke on Silvermoon. But he's doing it for good reasons, guys. And this mob is
immune to CC.
It does a Searing Rend tank buster that leaves these painful slashes on the ground, random damage to random players, and this terrible frontal. I am once again asking for edges on these frontals, Blizzard. The next boss starts the fight at 60% health because Lothraxion slapped her a bunch of times with his Light Claw before giving up and running to the end of the dungeon to wait for his cue. There are three main things happening in the Corewarden fight. She will summon a bunch of adds, including those nasty one-shot nullifiers, giant damage and dot circles on two random players, and the Light Scar Flare. A remnant of Lothraxion will charge into the boss arena at Corewarden Nysarra and stun her. You need to sidestep the initial hit as it will disorient and damage you, but once it's safe, you jump in for a 30% healing done and 300% damage buff. This is the time to bloodlust and melt the boss into the ground. But oh no, the line also damages you. This is the time to throw down that healing cooldown and defensive so people can stay in the line as long as possible. Because 300 damage is a lot, but dying is 0% damage. Best case scenario is you finish the fight with the line, but if that's not possible, make sure you kill all the adds before the line ends, because the boss will eat all remaining adds with Devour the Unworthy. This will heal her, give her a damage buff, and do damage to the whole group, so yeah, never let that happen. Then we click the other conduit thingy here and go back to the middle before we jump down. Remember to click the thing in the middle to summon the bridge. We've got 3 new enemies on the way to the boss, and woo boy! We've got these fixating bugs, flies. Anyway, they chase random players, and they also make you take increased damage from AoE effects. Then we've got flare bats, and the only thing they really do is put a circle on the ground when they die, which damages players and heals enemies in it. This is annoying, but you can purge this with Purge, Consume Magic, Dispel Magic, Devour Magic, or Spell Steal. If you can eat magic somehow, this ability is no longer a ground effect issue. Also, if you're a mage, you can spell steal this and strategically die and then damage the mobs and heal your party, but it's probably not worth the death penalty. Finally, we got light rots, and I hate these golden glowy genies from the bottom of my heart. They are constantly shooting holy balls at people, but more dangerously, each light rot shoots out burning radiance at 2 players, which puts a magic dot on them, and oh my god, it trucks. So if you're just fighting these 2 at the end of the bridge, you've potentially got 4 debuffs at the same time, and the dispel cooldown is like 8 seconds, so healer mechanics. Once all the lingering images here are dead, Lothraxion appears in the middle of the room. Like the lingering images, Lothraxion slaps the tank around with Searing Rend, which leaves scars on the ground. Then he puts circles on 3 players, which damages them, puts a dot on them, and leaves behind 2 copies of Lothraxion. You want to keep these copies sort of together and then move away from them, because accidentally touching a copy hurts a lot, and they will also form lines and jump to each other's positions, and standing in that hurts. At 100% energy, Lothraxion will cast Divine Guile, which will Kirby pull players towards him and then knock them back. Make sure you don't get knocked into one of his copies or off the platform. He will then hide among his copies and you will need to find the real Slim Lothraxion and kick his cast to continue the fight. The real Lothraxion is bald. And doesn't have horns. If someone kicks the wrong Lothraxion, oof. Welcome to a world of pain.
Pooja, what is this behavior?
I'm sorry, I kicked it by mistake.
You can't kick it by mistake.
And that's Nexus Point Xenas, a death trap in space full of on-death abilities and enemies that are immune to CC. Surviving this dungeon kind of feels like this.
I mean, you had 3 heart operations, you suffered 2 cardiac arrests, you died twice on the operating table, you had a stroke, and you were diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumour and given 4 months to live. Correct.
Prayer circle, you loot the ring set. Thanks for watching.